Good evening. If you live in an urban area and have access to fibre-based internet at your home or 4G internet connections, you'll know how the speed of that internet access can literally change your life. It makes you more productive. You also consume more content in the form of information and probably videos. Now, the government has signed an agreement with the chief executives of telecommunications companies to roll out fibre-based internet to rural areas in South Africa. There's likely to be a particular focus on what's going to happen in schools. The Minister of Communications and Digital Technologies, who signed the pledge on behalf of government, is Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams. She's in our Cape Town studios now. Minister, good evening to you and thank you so much for your time this Tuesday night.
Good evening, Stephen, and good evening to the viewers wherever they are.
So how is this going to work? What are you expecting from the telecoms companies? What do you think they're going to do?
Well, what we're expecting from the telecoms companies is to work with government in order to serve the people of South Africa. Of course, it's what they refer to as their consumer base. But most importantly is the fact that as government, we have a responsibility to create an enabling environment for these companies to thrive. Because as much as we encourage them to go to areas where there's no profit or there's limited profit, we also have to make sure that they don't die because we're killing them in terms of profit. So one of the key things is to say, how do we make sure that as we try to get everybody connected, we do not leave anyone outside, which is what we refer to as digital inclusion. Because if South Africa is to take leadership in the fourth industrial revolution, it has to be meaningful and impactful. And the only way to achieve that, the basic step, is to get people connected. And that's where we rely from these companies to say, you must make sure that you provide quality connectivity and it must be available to all.
So once the fibre is rolled out, I mean, what's happened in many urban areas is the fibre is rolled out by one company. You have another company that sits on top of that, the service provider, the internet service provider. I think the ISP is what they call them. Are you convinced ISPs will take advantage of this as well? They'll be interested in rolling out their services on top of these other fibre connections to people in rural areas? Should it just increase their market?
Well, as we say, fourth industrial revolution, as much as it gives threats to other people, but it also has lots of possibilities and opportunities. And therefore, as we talk of the different economies that are derived from the fourth industrial revolution, you just make reference to the service platform that they must look into. We're also looking into the infrastructure and the investment. Therefore, this is an opportunity to say now that there will be infrastructure that's rolled out, how do we make sure that other people come in terms of ensuring that they render the service whereby they're connecting the user to the infrastructure that is rolled out. It presents an opportunity not only to startups, it presents an opportunity to people who may want to think creatively. As I'm talking to you right now, everybody's complaining, those that are in the film industry, for example, they're saying we don't get enough space to be commissioned. Now, if we're talking about people who are connected, it means they do not have to wait for any of the broadcasters to commission them formally. They can then be able to have access to international markets and, of course, starting with Africa, to share the content that they have. That's just one of the spin-offs when you have quality connectivity and have people that utilize that as the platform to drive their own economic agenda.
Is it possible to know how long it might take to roll out these fibre networks to rural areas? In some cases, there are long distances to cover. You might have to either get that cable through poles, which can be quite risky. They're vulnerable to thunderstorms, for example, or someone has to dig a very long trench.
Definitely, it's not something that's going to happen tomorrow or next year, because one of the key things that government has decided on is that there's a need for wall-to-wall connectivity, which means everybody must be connected, not only referring to the population connectivity, but looking into the geographical connectivity that despite any area that you're in, you must have access to the network that we're talking about. This therefore tells that we've got to do a proper map out, because this also includes resourcing of the activities that we want on board. And as I said, introduction of new incentives to the industry players that must be encouraged to go to the rural areas. But crucial to that, because we may be able to connect people, but if people don't know what is that they must use the connectivity for, it will be wasteful. That is why as the department we have said we are looking into the entire ecosystem. Provide connectivity, give people skills, create opportunities for innovators, make sure that you create a market for them. And as government, we've taken a decision that we're going to work together, no more siloed approach. Because if we are saying innovators must come on board of this infrastructure that will be laid out, we expect them to say, If South Africa is good in manufacturing, if South Africa is good in agriculture, how do we leverage on the technologies presented by the fourth industrial revolution to address the economic challenges that we are faced with? Therefore, it's not something that we can say over 2 years, over 5 years. Definitely it's not going to be less than 10 years. South Africa is one of the big countries, and therefore lots of resources are required. It doesn't mean we're only waiting for government. That's why we said it's important to partner with the industry, because it is them that must lead the rollout of the infrastructure that we're talking about. But government has to ensure that the environment is really conducive for them to do so.
You've also created, Minister, a rapid deployment coordination centre. How is that going to work? It sounds almost a bit like a war room in some way, to try and make sure that this happens quickly.
Definitely something like a war room. Most of the operators have been complaining that as much as they are given license in national, when they go out to deploy at local level, because remember deployment happens at a local base, when they go there, there's lots of waivers that are imposed to them by the municipalities. And at times it therefore means that they must pay more, but at the same time it delays the process and the timing of the rollout of the infrastructure. Now we said it's high time that we bring all the key stakeholders together, so that we know that in the province of Limpopo there are so many people that are going to roll out, and this is what is expected. Therefore, bring on board SALGA, bring on board COGTA, bring on board traditional leaders, bring on board municipalities, the department, and everybody else that matters in the committee to say how do we make together to make sure that we create that enabling environment without it getting delayed, and the service providers must be finding themselves to go to this office, that office, and people on the ground are complaining about the delays. So that team that we have established, that committee of rapid deployment, is to say how do we attack the challenges that we're faced with that delay and makes the cost to be higher of the rollout of the infrastructure. Because once the cost is too expensive of deployment, it therefore means that it's going to be transferred to the consumer. And as a caring government, we have a responsibility to mitigate such, to make sure that our people don't pay more for things that can be avoided.
All right, Minister, I mean, people will be waiting for this to happen, as I say, and of course I accept what you say, that it will take some time. South Africa, a big country. It is also, if we can just change the subject for a moment, it's International Postal Services Day tomorrow. Our post office, of course, has been going through a period of recovery. I think no one can deny the improvements we've seen in the post office over the last little while. Are you expecting those improvements to continue?
Well, we're expecting that the post office will be showcasing one of the key things that they've achieved in terms of making sure that as South Africa, we always welcome everybody to live in it, those that of course are documented, and we give them access to all the rights that they have, including transferring monies from South Africa to their areas. So the post office has created an enabling environment it's going to be launching their mobile money service that helps them to send money to the SADC region. So that's a great story for us, and we're looking forward to enjoying certain things. Recently, the UPU, which is the Union of Postal Services, has given South Africa a status of saying, let them take lead in terms of e-commerce in the SADC region. And that's an opportunity that's presented to us to say, in this digital era, how do we make sure that we make the post office to be relevant, whilst we're doing away with the old jobs, but making sure that we upskill our people to be ready for the jobs of the future. That's the digitization of the postal services.
And Minister, I work for the SABC, so I have to ask, thank you for the bailout, which we received earlier this week. Do appreciate it. And there's a lot of speculation about the sale of non-core assets. Are you able to confirm? Are we going to have to wait a little while? Are you able to confirm if it means that radio stations might be sold, or are you going to say, Stephen, be patient?
For that one, unfortunately, I have to wait for the SABC to give me guidance on. It is SABC that knows which assets make profit. It is SABC that knows that here we've just duplicated services, we don't need them. And therefore, once the SABC compiles a report and presents it to the minister, we'll be able to say, yes, indeed, this that they are saying, it makes sense. There's a need for us to do away with certain radio stations. And as I say that, we're not looking at SABC of today. We're talking about the SABC of the future that must be able to provide relevant information, but must be able also to appreciate the technological advancements that are there. So as they look into the assessment of their assets, they are taking that into consideration to say, we don't do away today with Metro FM, for example, and then in the next 5 years, we say we shouldn't have done that. Therefore, we need to buy Metro FM back because it is what is doing or that is relevant in the digital space. So we say said, take your time, make your assessment in line with your turnaround strategy of what you want to see in the future. Then come to us and tell us what are the areas that we can do away with. Once that report is there, you will be the first ones to know.
Feel free to leak it to us ahead of time. Minister, thank you so much. Really do appreciate it. The Minister of Communications and Digital Technology, Stella Ndabeni-Abrahams, in our Cape Town studio.